G'day budgies and witches and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to share with you my brand new 2-foot peninsula reef tank, which will be the next project we're going to focus on heavily on the channel. Now I cannot even begin to describe just how excited I am to get this system up and running. And if you're sharing the same level of excitement that I am, then feel free to consider subscribing to this channel and giving this video a thumbs up. However, let's now have a look at how this tank actually got to being here. Now, ever since the inception of this fish room, I've always wanted to have a saltwater aquarium. And if you've been following me over the past few years on this channel, you'll tend to know that I kind of go wild with my ideas of aquariums that I want to have. I tend to be a bit of a dreamer, and in this fish room, I really wanted to go big with my reef aquarium. At one point, I was planning a 6-foot saltwater display where I could have some sort of small species of shark, like a northern wobbegong or something in the cat shark family. However, I really had to assess, as I always do, the cost, the practicality, and the usability of this space and how I would use that aquarium. And eventually, the smaller system seemed to be a lot better. I've already had close to 2 years of experience in my old fish room with nano saltwater aquariums, but having the ability to start with a clean slate on a system that I have complete control over still really held its appeal in my mind, and that's how we got to planning this tank. Through most of the week, I actually have the pleasure of working from home in this fish room, and I really wanted to go grand with this saltwater aquarium, and that means I wanted to experience it as much as possible, so I wanted it right next to me. Now, originally I was actually planning on having it along the wall, and it would be right next to my freshwater grow-out rack. However, the idea of a peninsular aquarium that I could actually view from all 3 sides was something that was really appealing to me. Now, I know I've been hyping up this reef tank build and using words like grand, acting like it is some brand spanking new off-the-shelf system like a Cade or water box, but it is nowhere near that level of quality. About 95% in this build is just tanks and equipment that I've repurposed from my previous fish room and stuff that I've already had on hand. But it's also part of the reason why I'm super excited for this tank as a whole, because I've seen all of these different parts, pieces, and tanks that are all coming together for one consolidated unit, which hopefully should have a lot of long-term success like those off-the-shelf tanks, because I've basically tried to copy them as much as I possibly can. However, when we look at the actual tank for this display, it is 60 centimeters long, 30 centimeters wide, and 30 centimeters tall, and that's the same dimensions as the sump. And the overall system volume comes to a combined amount of 150 liters or close to 40 gallons, but obviously with water displacement, the height that I run the sump and all of those sorts of things, we'd be looking at closer to about 100 liters. Each tank will hold 75 liters of water comfortably by themselves, but combined it'll be a lot less than that. The one thing that's different though in this aquarium rendition compared to my previous nano tanks is what I mentioned earlier, and that is the sump. Now, the largest aquarium in this fish room is a 1,500 liter freshwater display that has an absolutely monster sized sump under it, and having this sump has been one of the greatest things I've ever experienced in my journey of keeping aquariums. Having that sump makes it super easy to maintain, keeps the system super nice and tidy because all of the equipment is tucked away in that sump, and that way it just gives me so much more initiative to maintain the display tank because I know that it is front and center and you won't see any equipment. And I wanted that same principle to convert over into this saltwater aquarium because I know how much of a workload that saltwater aquariums can produce given my previous experience, and the previous nano tanks I used to have were pretty much just all Frankenstein pieces of equipment in the main display, and at times it would be hard to access certain things, and that would mean you wouldn't clean them, you'd lose motivation, so on and so forth. But to give you a basic idea of how this actually flows and what we're operating in the sump, through the overflow, water will flow down, passing through a gate valve where I can make small adjustments to the water to make sure, there's not too much going down all at once, and really fine tune that level of flow in the sump. That'll then go through a filter sock, which is held by a 3D printed filter sock holder, the things we can do these days, and that'll enter the essentially open plan sump, a very modern way of sump architecture, if you might say. No, it's just because I didn't want to deal with installing baffles in there, making it a crammed space, because it already is a pretty small footprint that we're working with, and baffles would just be eating up way too much of that. And effectively, I won't be losing too much efficiency in the sump by keeping it open like this, so I'm not too worried. In there we've got just over 2 liters of marine pure bioballs, which is fantastic biological media to have in here because it gives me so much surface area for bacterial colonization. In terms of additional equipment to provide some water circulation in the sump, I've got a power head, I've also got a 100 watt heater, and I also have my return pump. There is one piece of equipment which still hasn't arrived, and that is my Bulbomagus Nano Skimmer, which I will be installing on this sump the second that it arrives. But that's pretty much all the equipment that we've got in there. Oh, and also the auto doser, but I'm not really worrying about that too much because we don't have corals in the system just yet. But I will have a Kamoa auto doser on this tank. But after going through the entire sump, filtering out, the water will then return through the return pump into the main display through that random flow generator nozzle that I have, creating that really cool wave motion that you would see, especially out in the wild, on those big natural reefs. Now, any good reef needs a proper foundation. I'm saying this like I am the creator of reefs. That's absolutely not true. However, if you see any reef in the wild and any proper thriving reef aquarium, they always have a good foundation, and that is the rockscape that we've got in the tank. Now, I'm specifically using Marco rock because, again, it's rock that I had on hand from previous nano displays that I had running, and it's well seasoned, which means it's been in those tanks for over a year. It's leached out any silicates and nasties that new rock tends to leach out. However, it's no longer live rock because it's been completely dry for months. It's gone through a bleach dip to really kill off everything. Then I've cured it and made sure that it's safe to go into this aquarium. But you may notice a little bit of staining here and there. That's just through random algae that you encounter in the reef aquarium hobby, and also just being exposed to the elements. But it's all safe rock, good to go. But I wanted to keep it pretty minimal. Normally, I really enjoy making intricate rockscapes, but I find that when you cover them up with corals and the corals grow in and do their things, all of that effort that you put doesn't really hold any weight to it. So this time around, I actually didn't use any super glue, didn't use anything to lock the rocks in place, except for just placing them in. And I'm very, very happy with the way that it's come out, surprisingly, as a matter of fact as well. But when we have a look at the overall reefscape, it's pretty much the best angle is from here because it's where I sit. But it's pretty through all 3 sides. But I've pretty much just tried to emulate a small reef shelf. It's sort of a cove where you've got the main island for the primary corals that I plan on having in here, like my big LPS and SPS frags and colonies. And then the smaller islands of rocks that you see will be for the softies, and especially for zoanthids, because I really, really love my zoas. So I'm planning on having like a single color of zoanthid on all of those little islands, and then primarily having some SPS up the top and some LPS. But I really do want to try and push myself and make this a SPS dominant display if I can. And that's part of the reason why I was so pedantic of getting a sump in here as well, for that additional water volume, to give it a little bit more stability. But I just really want to tackle that challenge and say that I've got a nano SPS system, because I think they look absolutely amazing. Now, to get the reef tank looking as pretty as it does right now, I did need to focus on the lighting, but thankfully I already had a very, very beefy saltwater aquarium light on hand. And what we're looking at is the Delua Illumagic Blaze Mini. And I absolutely love this light because it has a fantastic range of spectrums. It's got a really good intensity of purple that brings out that radioactive fluorescence. You've got the blue that just makes the corals glow. And you've also got the white to give you that really nice natural spread. And the spread on this light is fantastic. It's edge to edge coverage. Now, if I was being super pedantic, I might want to put a little pixel up here, but honestly, I'm not that fussed. I'm really happy with it, and there's enough par on that center island of rocks and enough lighting intensity to make even the finickiest of SPS corals like a strawberry shortcake thrive. At least I would hope. But I think it looks great, and I'm not really going to worry too much on lighting because that pretty much covers it. I do need to, however, add a light for the refugium because I would like to grow some macroalgae in the sump, and I also do need to add my great white. Is it the great white or the... It's a wave maker. It is a Delua wave maker, and I believe it is the Great White Wave Maker. But I've got to add that into the main display as well. And that pretty much wraps it up for the equipment in this tank. Obviously, the sump and the whole tank as a whole doesn't have any water in it, which means everything that I've just said about how the system flows is, in theory, it should work. Especially based off all the planning and measuring and prepping that I did. However, the reason that I've left it dry, especially for this video, even though I've got everything good to go, is because I wanted to make sure I get your input on the build of this tank to see if there are any major improvements I should do, things I should look out for, or things you should see me implement in this tank, and that way I can action those before actually getting the system wet. So if you do have any thoughts like that, definitely feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. But bodgies and widgies, that is it in terms of how we've got this tank looking so far. Next week, it's going to be wet, it's going to be full of water, running, ready to start the cycle, and maybe even add some of the first foundations of life into this aquarium. So if you're excited for that and you want to see how the system evolves, then feel free to give this video a thumbs up like I mentioned earlier, and consider subscribing to the channel so you can follow along without missing a beat. But thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, stay happy, stay safe, stay Aussie Australian, Bodgy out.